Becky, it's been 69 days.
I know, I can't take eating any more of these lean cuisines.
This angel soft is fucking delicious.
Bobby, don't eat the lean. I'll give you some hand sanitizer for the angel soft.
I love Purell. It gets me drunk still.
What are you guys doing?
It's the coronavirus.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine out there. Anybody want some Cheetos? Just get out of that cabin 28.
That's good.
What?
Hello, Free Rotation Nation. We interrupt your regularly scheduled nerdy program to dive into the macabre and dark. I am known as Bibby and Bobbles, boy with fantastic hair. I am joined by Beckles.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this next podcast episode. I hope that you enjoy it. Okay.
We also have our commander-in-chief, Angela.
Am I a Cheeto now?
Yeah. No.
I was waiting for you to start being like, and yes, everything will be fine. We have hired all the private sectors.
I am extremly intelligent. Matter of fact, the doctors say I should have been a doctor because I'm so knowledgeable. He actually said some fucking shit
I
like that.
know.
You know that, right? Oh, this isn't political, though.
Oh, yeah.
Bobby,
We're not talking about the coronavirus. Hey, guy, you know that nobody's worried about the coronavirus.
We're dating this episode real hardcore, but I like it anyway.
Yeah.
It is the year 2020. Everybody is in their house. We went bowling and the children weren't there. It was fan-fucking-tastic.
The coronials.
Oh, my God. That's awesome. The coronials.
I stole it.
Oh,
I
no.
saw it. I wish I had made it up. I didn't.
You own it now, though.
Yeah.
Fuck
It's
yeah.
copyrighted on
Copyright
this podcast.
2020.
Trademarked.
Boop.
These next few weeks, we'll be discussing various unsolved crimes. Strap in and find your favorite stuffed animal, because this is some messed up shit.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. We're going to do an entire rotation on unsolved mysteries. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. What is the unsolved? It's a rotation update.
Disclaimer. This is not a super in-depth discussion. We will be here for hours if we did that. More like a brief overlook. However, if you're interested in learning more, do your own fucking research. Stop calling us dumb. The crime. The Keddie murders is an unsolved crime from 1981. It was a quadruple homicide that occurred in Keddie, a rural resort town in the Sierra Nevada of Northern California.
Say rural resort town 5 times fast.
Fuck that. I'm good.
Rural resort town. Blah, blah, blah. That's how coronavirus started.
The murders took place in Cabin 28 of the Keddie Resort during the late evening of April 11th or early the following morning. There isn't, an exact time.
So for some background, in the fall of 1980, Sue Sharpe, along with her 5 children, left her home in Connecticut after separating from her husband. She then decided to relocate to Keddie due to her fact her brother actually lived around that area. The 5 children that lived with Sue was her oldest son, John, her daughter, Sheila, Tina, and her 2 younger sons, Rick and Greg. On April 11th, 1981, around 1:30, Sue and Sheila drove from Keddie to pick John and his friend up from Gassner Park in Quincy, California, and brought them back to Keddie. 2 hours later, they then hitchhiked back there and were visiting some friends, and there were witnesses who saw them that day prior to the incident that ends up happening where they're killed. That same evening, Sheila had plans to spend the night with the Seabolt family, who lives in an adjacent cabin, while Sue remained at home with Rick, Greg, and the boys' youngest friend, Justin Smart. Sheila departed that home shortly after 8 p.m., leaving her mother alone with the younger children. Tina, who had been watching television with the Seabolts, returned to the cabin around 9:30 p.m. after Sheila arrived to spend the night.
And the bodies of Sue, John, and Dana were found on the morning of April 12th by Sue's 14-year-old daughter, Sheila. Tina, the 4th victim, remained missing for the next 3 years until her skull and bones were recovered at Camp 18, California. So it was about an hour-and-a-half drive. Mm-hmm. And the only reason they found her body was someone called it in.
Yeah, they had found the top of her skull, and they were like, oh, we found the skull top. And then they received an anonymous call saying, hey, that's Tina Sharpe. And
Yeah. And it's important to note that some of the suspects initially, even though you've whittled it down a little bit more, one of the suspects was Sue's ex-husband because she had left him and taken her 5 children to Keddie, California or whatever. So that's why they were living there, was because of a nasty divorce.
Also note that Tina, there was blood found. The murders happened in the living room. Tina, there was blood. The only other place blood was found was on Tina's bed. So they feel like she was raped and kidnapped. And also note Sue was found with her pants off as well.
Yep.
Oh, one of the other things was Sheila came home and said lights were off. Another thing to note was the phone was off the hook, so nobody could call her.
Oh yeah, that was kind of crazy as well. It's like that's clearly premeditated at that point.
Oh, weirdly, in an adjoining bedroom, the 2 youngest Sharpe boys, Ricky and Greg, as well as their neighbor, 12-year-old Justin Smart, were found unharmed. They had apparently slept through the entire massacre, which unfolded mere feet from their beds.
That's what's weird about this part was the fact that neighbors could hear what sounded like muffled screaming coming from the cabin. Nobody reported it because they couldn't tell where the muffled screaming was coming from. The problem is, how could a neighbor in an adjoining cabin hear it, and then these boys didn't hear it at all? So that was really suspicious.
I go into it a little bit later.
Yeah.
I do. The murders of Sue, John, and Dana were notably vicious. 2 bloody knives and 1 hammer are found at the scene, and one of the knives, a steak knife, later determined to be used in the murders, was bent in half due to extreme force. And steak knives are pretty fucking thick.
Yeah.
You gotta do some shit. And Sheila's sister, Tina Sharpe, was nowhere to be found until 3 years later. Here's some theories, suspects, and etc. There was no sign that robbery was the motive, as nothing was missing and the cabin hadn't been ransacked. It immediately became obvious that someone had entered Cabin 28 intending to murder someone. It was a targeted crime, one that was deeply personal. There were no signs of forced entry, which suggested the victims knew the killers, leading to our 2 main suspects. The first was Marty Smart, the stepfather of Justin Easton and the Sharpe's neighbor from just a few doors down in Cabin 26. The second suspect was a man named John Bobidi. Bobidi, who went by Bo. Bo Jackson.
Oh, Bo knows.
Both men had criminal histories, but Bo's background was particularly disturbing. He had been involved in organized crime in Chicago. Marty, a Vietnam vet, suffered from PTSD. Then the two shortly met before the murders at a VA hospital. Marty, it seems, was an abusive husband, and Sue had been encouraging his wife, Marilyn, to leave him, which provides plenty of motive there. I mean, he's already he's not stable.
And she did leave him. So
yeah, there was a lot of tension, if I'm not mistaken, toward the end of Sue Sharpe's life, where Marty and his wife were having a lot of issues. And I suspect if you already have PTSD and you have anger issues, having somebody encouraging the one thing that's probably a rock in your life to leave you because you're such a jackwagon probably didn't bode well for their relationship or their friendship to begin with.
Curiously, Marty later told the police he was missing a hammer, which happened to be one of the murder weapons. It seems kind of fishy to me.
That was what was weird about this entire thing. Is initially when they first interview Marty, he mentions that hammer is missing, but then the hammer is later found like in it. But then he says, "Well, I knew a hammer was missing, but that was my hammer." Like,
well, also fishy was his wife called the police and said, "I just found a bloody jacket in my basement, and this hammer is here as well, and it's bloody." So it's like he literally was found with, bloody red flags all around him.
He was caught
red-handed.
Hammered.
Oh, he was hammered.
Yeah, he got hammered.
Some believe there might have been a police cover-up, as Marty was friends with the current sheriff, Doug Thomas. This is all alleged, by the way. I don't want to get sued.
Right. And the problem is that...
well, it is documented. When they investigated that police department for being what's that word? Not
corruption.
Basically being inefficient and mishandling of the case.
Inept, basically. Yeah. What I find weird is that there was a lot of signs leading to the fact that these two were involved in this murder.
Especially when they said his stepson was there, and he was like, well, he may have seen something and went undetected by me. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Super fucked.
Like, that should have been your first...
Like, you were there and didn't know he was there? What?
Yeah.
Thomas, the sheriff, apparently counseled the couple once about their marital troubles shortly before the murder. What kind of sheriff does it? That's so fucking weird.
That is kind of weird.
That's so weird.
Well, I guess if it's a small town, it's like maybe he was a good friend to both of them and he could sit there and talk. But I think it's weird, too. I don't disagree with you about that.
I would have gone with the priest instead.
Yeah, or a minister of some sort, or a therapist, like somebody who was licensed to do that.
You need a little bit of Jesus in your life, right, Angela? Jesus, he cures everything.
Yeah.
with the utmost sarcasm. So the sheriff at least knew of their problems before the events of April 11th.
Can you imagine being Sheila, the daughter that came home? She opens the door, all the lights are off. She turns it on, and there's apparently there was a horrific smell, which you can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
The inside of your body smells disgusting. And it is her mom, who's obviously been raped and murdered, her brother, and then there's just these 3 sleeping kids. Like, how do you not fucking know? But then to be those kids asleep and get woken up by, like, Mom's fucking dead out there. You didn't hear her get murdered?
Well, and what's
Can you
even
imagine being those boys living with that?
Well, what's even weirder about all of this is that, okay, going like back to the fact that like how ineffective the police were investigating this, they didn't even notice Tina was missing for a couple hours.
Yeah.
They're just like,
Even
oh,
though it had been said she was missing.
yeah. Oops, I've lost a child. It's like Home Alone. How wholesome. It's Macaulay Culkin except kidnapped and murdered.
And Sheila told him right away, Tina's missing. There's somebody missing, and they still don't bother with it.
No. It's also theorized that Justin Smart may have witnessed the crime, but blocked it out due to trauma and the fear of his father. Because, like, I didn't write this down because it was a lot, but he had, like, dreams that night, or what he thought was dreams, of, like, his friends and family being stabbed to death.
Right.
And everything, but he wasn't sure.
Well, wasn't it? They did
hypnosis.
No, it was Justin. I think they did do it with
Yeah,
Justin.
They
Did hypnosis on him, and he was able to describe somebody who he said were the suspects in this case.
And it looked eerily similar to these two, but you think he would have recognized his stepdad.
I think it's just mental blockage, and I get that. You go through someone that young, and you're already in an abusive situation. Like, I feel bad for him. Like, he's gone through some shit.
Because if he hit his wife, he probably beat his kid, too.
Yeah, I guarantee you.
Well, and think about it. Like, this isn't his kid anyways.
Yeah.
Like, if he's already suffering from some sort of anger issue to begin with, he probably gave no shits about him anyways. And he probably, like, there's a lot of documented cases of kids who have been abused in any sort of fashion where they have blocked it. But it isn't until they're older, when they kind of open up to a therapist or a hypnosis or anything like that, that they realize it happened. And the stories are generally consistent with a pattern of what the abuse would have looked like at the time it happened.
It takes a while to come to terms with that. It really does. It's a whole thing.
Well, and think about it. If you're sitting there and let's hypothetically say it was his stepdad, and you hear what sounds like muffled screaming coming from there, and you look out and what you see is your stepdad, like, horrifically murdering 3 people. Like, how do you react to that? There's no... I mean, unless you're, like, just strong, you got strong mental or something.
Yeah.
Well, and you have to be careful, too, because we know that from Marilyn, Bo, and Marty all stopped by just to see if Sue wanted to go to the bar with them, which was sus, because she doesn't like them except the wife, and they don't like her.
Yeah.
So she says no, and then they go to the bar, and apparently they come back, and then go back out. So he very well could have seen him there earlier in the night and got his mind wires crossed, so... In all fairness.
And it's true. I mean, it could, and you know what? Think about it. If you have a negative association, I mean, this is behavioral reinforcement 101. Let's say I have a negative association to Angie of some sort, and, like, I associate her with, like, the worst person in the world. Maybe they've always ever said there's unreliable witness. Unreliable witnesses are just a thing that exists. If the thing that I'm going to attribute to somebody negative doing something and I've thought it, I might attribute it to the person who I have a negative reinforcement with.
Yeah. But Marilyn said that Marty was very violent that night. He didn't like the music at the bar.
Yeah, which I thought was so weird.
He was
like,
incredibly violent to her to the point that she left him that night. And that's why she says, I really think they did this.
Which it kind of makes sense, because if you look how violent the crime itself was, like, slashed their throats. Sue had her, like, was naked from the bottom half. She had her underwear stuffed in her mouth and adhesive tapes, like, taped to her mouth. Like, it was a vicious killing. It wasn't in cold blood.
Said, I can't remember which of the boys that was murdered, but she said he hated the Sharpe boy because it was him and his friend
John.
Marilyn said that Marty hated that kid.
Yeah.
Hated him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very likely that, you know, and it makes sense. It's a good connection. You have a good motive. You have a good connection to the family. It's just, and you have the association with the stepson that this could have happened. It's just, you have to have good, effective police work to make it happen.
Which clearly this town didn't have.
It did not.
Is Cabin 28 haunted? There were reports before it was torn down of it being haunted. Like, and it makes sense with the violent murders happening there.
Yeah.
There's, like, reports of screams, like, in the middle of the night, like, blood-curdling screams, like, lights going on and off, stuff being thrown. but it's since been torn down to dissuade visitors from, trying to stay the night. Because A, you'll have ghost hunters, and then B, you'll have like true crime enthusiasts like, oh, I stayed in a murder house. It's kind of cool.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like anybody who goes and stay in Lizzie Borden's house. It's like, oh, somebody got murdered here.
Do you know how fucking expensive it is to stay there? It's
really
fucking
expensive.
ridiculous. I'm like, yeah, it's cool bread and breakfast, but like, I don't need it that bad.
Well, and on top of this, with the murders, there was, and of course it's the 80s.
Yeah.
It's no relation to probably what actually happened, but they thought it was a satanic cult that did it.
Yeah. Of course, the satanic panic at that time.
Yeah, so think about that on top of it. It's like you had a satanic cult come and kill these people as sacrifices in this home. Of course you've summoned demons.
And this place had been previously a popular resort, but now it's a quote-unquote ghost town.
It's kind of sad, though. That's,
I
it's not the resort's fault that this happened, but can you imagine, like, hello, there are morbid people out there in the macabre. I don't know if I would necessarily be one of those people who would want to go stay there.
When we go on vacation to the cabins, we always take safety precautions because we don't want to be this cabin in the wood, Keddie Cabin murders.
Nope.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know. It's just crazy because this was also, wasn't this also like The Strangers? That movie was based on this?
Yeah, the director said no. But
it was.
Yeah, but there's like he didn't want to take credit from that. But it clearly is a lot of what it was because between the axe, hammer, knives, and stuff, there's a lot of stuff.
And what I find interesting about this is like I can see why it would loosely be based on The Strangers, but the thing about this murders in real life, what you find is that the most violent murders where there's an absence of any sort of robbery is somebody you know.
Yep.
Period. The end.
Kind of passion.
Yeah. There's no logic, even in an illogical state. Like, why would somebody break into a house, brutally murder somebody, and not take anything if it was just a stranger, just somebody?
Yep. And a psychic also said the ghosts are still probably in shock from how brutal the murders were and still haven't moved on. So it makes sense. Now, I'm not claiming it's haunted because I haven't been there, but it's certainly a possibility.
Well, and there's always a thing about, like, energy.
Yeah. And, like, the place itself remembers. So it's a trauma for the atmosphere, for the cabin, the surrounding countryside. And we think that things we do make note, but we leave energy footprints.
Well, it's like if you go into, say you go into somebody's house where it's just kind of dreary and drab. You can sense
pick
it.
that up,
yeah. It's weird.
I mean, you come in here and feel abused by animals right off the bat.
That's kind of true.
But they love you.
It's a toxic relationship.
Jeez.
I feed them, support them. They don't even do dishes.
Really, to be fair, humans have Stockholm syndrome to animals.
It's true.
But they're cute.
Human, pet my ear. Now feed me.
Now you know who would have made this not happen? A cat. A fucking dog or a cat. They would attack the shit out of them.
I don't know. Gus will just roll over on his back for belly rubs, whoever shows up.
Riesling goes running the opposite
Exactly.
way.
When my sister needed me to go, like, look for something in her house and I had to break in, her dog was like, oh my God.
It's Angie. Come on in.
But the cat was like, I'm going to fuck you up. Remember, I had like gouges. I'm
Black as night.
He's ginger. So.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Gingers are scary.
Yeah.
Here are some recent updates to the case. The current investigators of the case have personal ties to the victims. Sheriff Hagwood was a schoolmate of victims Johnny and Dana, and the summer before their murders, they all worked together as teenagers on a painting crew. Hagwood's mother was a teacher who had Tina in class.
So this makes more sense. So now I guess with them recently reopening the investigation, they actually have an vested interest in finding out who did it.
Well, and he came out. I didn't realize he knew them, but remember we were just hearing that Sheriff Hagwood said they have a live suspect because Marty and Bo are dead.
Right. Well, and on top
they died in like 2000, 2004.
Well, and you got to think contextually about the time period. This was a time period where even though it was the 80s, it was a lot of hokey towns. If you had ties to a community at any point in time, they took your safety and your preservation over anybody else's. We've had it here. I mean, we've had cold cases that were solved that were clearly investigated because they knew who had done it and they didn't want that person to take the fall for it.
Gamberg, he's the deputy with him. The first thing he did after putting put on the case was organize boxes of case reports and evidence. He soon found this letter from Marty Smart to his wife Marilyn, reportedly written soon after the murders. He reportedly wrote, I've paid the price for your love, and now that I've bought it with 4 people's lives, you tell me that we are through? Great. What else do you want? So I'm like, whoa,
Plus, he confessed.
Exactly.
Like, literally confessed.
Yep. Marilyn does not recall ever receiving a letter, which might make sense because the sheriff probably intercepted that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or he wrote it, never gave it to her.
Yeah.
Like he had just kept it because maybe it was out of a guilt thing, like just kind of an outlet for what he had done.
She has since remarried. She reportedly learned of the letter years afterwards, but recognized her ex-husband's handwriting.
Oh, shit.
Mike Gamberg also recently spoke to Marty's former therapist in Reno, Nevada, where he moved shortly after the murders. Marty allegedly confessed to the murders during a session.
Okay, so this is the thing about this point. And Angie did bring up a good point. I can't remember exactly, and I don't know if it's because of how many years it's been or if it's like somebody wasn't in imminent danger, but I'm fairly certain you have to report, regardless of the fact of whether it's an old murder or not, or it hasn't happened. You have to report a crime regardless of confidentiality.
That therapist said he described it in detail. So the therapist doesn't know exactly how they were killed, but he described the hammers and why he did it and why he beat their faces in and how he felt guilty about taking Tina.
Yeah.
Yeah. The therapist reportedly told Gamberg that he was surprised the investigators at the time of the murders hadn't used that confession against Marty because the sheriff at the time had talked to the therapist.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait.
So
So wait, he did know all about it and didn't investigate it. Oh,
But remember, it's his best friend.
Yep.
They were best buds.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is both the main suspects are dead, so the surviving family members won't really know true justice. Marty died in 2006, and Bo died in 1988.
So let's talk about this a little bit. So here's the thing that I have a big problem with is that it's not like it's 1947 and it's difficult to investigate these things. I'm surprised that the state police or FBI did not step in with the mishandling.
Yeah, because this made national news.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was. Yeah, go ahead.
And remember, they did find a thumbprint on the back railing stairs, so they had a fingerprint they could have compared it with.
Right, of an unknown individual. Now, the only thing about fingerprints that I will say that people I don't think realize, hey, I have to deal with police work all the time. Unless you have, but in this case, I think they were. But if you're not a convicted felon or you've never had to put your fingerprint in a database, if you have an unknown fingerprint, it will come up unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were both soldiers. Their fingerprints were out there.
Right. So they could have compared it at that point.
But also, Bo lied to the police and said he had been a Chicago cop for 18 years and had only retired forcibly when he was shot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a flat-out lie.
Yeah, he was fucking organized crime.
Yeah, so this was something easily checked out and dismissed, and then, oh, you lied about this. What else are you lying about?
Well, what I find frustrating about this case is that this is an unnecessarily unsolved crime.
Yep.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this isn't a case where a body was dumped somewhere. They have some suspects. There's not a lot linking them to why they did it. But, or like, those women who went missing in like the Appalachians where you see the person like walking behind them and you can't identify who it is. And you don't have any other information other than that last piece of information. There's clearly a line of evidence here that leads back to these two guys being at least involved somewhat, or at least you could have gotten them arrested and put on trial. If they were acquitted, that's something.
Yeah.
But you don't have any answer. You've left the answer. Let me back up what I'm saying. You have purposely unanswered questions that could have been answered. So it's just really frustrating. And there is a thing now with the flip of it is that in 2018 they did have another fingerprint that they found that was identified to a living possible suspect.
Yeah, who was known for brutally raping and murdering young girls.
Yeah.
And also, here's the thing, too, about the people who said they heard screams. They all were bound and gagged.
Yep.
So she was gagged with a blue bandana and her own underwear, and it was taped over her mouth. You can't really scream through that. Your mouth goes dry. You can't scream through it. So I'm wondering if the muffled screaming the people in the other cabin heard wasn't Tina being taken out. And that's also why the boys, it said they had a TV on and they've been watching TV. And you know how loud kids listen to shit.
Yeah.
Plus, they sleep pretty hard.
Well, and there also an important note is that their throats were slashed.
Yeah.
It's hard to scream if you don't have a working throat.
The only way that makes sense is like initially when allegedly Marty and Bo came in, they came in like with like knives and swinging and shit. That's they might have heard it then, but afterwards.
Well, I guess
Or came in and be like, I'm gonna, kill your mom if you two don't sit down and let us tie you up.
Yep.
Yeah. It's scary in the sense that there are a lot of the questions here unanswered are whether the statements that were made are inconsistent with what actually happened. The fact I tend to believe the boys more so that they didn't hear anything because, I mean, let's be honest. Like, if they came in and said, sit down, I have a knife, I'm going to stab your mother. I mean, who doesn't just comply with that?
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't have kids, but I
Yeah.
have pets. If I knew that shutting up, even if it was going to get me killed, kept other people in my house safe, I'm not going to make noise and have my kids come out and get killed.
Yep.
I know I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Right.
So they don't know where these other kids are. I mean, they were literally right next to them. But
I just find it's just so sad to see these cases because, like, there are some not reported, like, greatly solved cases, like how they're the good police work done on these cases. What's frustrating about this case is that this is an unnecessarily unsolved case. That's what makes me mad about it, is because, I mean, it's the 80s. You have the technology to figure out who did it. Even if there is an iota of chance that they were innocent, you had ways to find out who did it.
You know what I blame? Hairspray and our shriveled raisin of a former president, Ronald Reagan.
Was Ronald Reagan president then?
During the 80s.
you know what I blame? The media.
And cocaine.
And
A lot of coke in the 80s.
Well, I kind of wonder, like, to me, it's like, it's, okay, here's the outlier that I want to bring up, is if this was all, and I'm playing devil's advocate at this point, if this was all Marty being pissed off at Sue, why would he kidnap Tina?
Well, I think if you're going to rape the mom, why wouldn't you rape a 12-year-old girl? If you're going to go that extreme. And it could have been the Beau guy who decided to take her off and do whatever with her. Remember, he'd only been in town for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So he was new. We don't know what all he was into.
Yep.
We
True.
do know he was a violent criminal.
Just seems.
Or maybe they had another friend and they were like, let's just take her up here. I know who would like to have fun with her. Like,
Yep.
It is scary, though, thinking about it, because it's like they found her skull like a mile and a half away from it. I just started thinking missing 411. What if it was a Sasquatch?
Oh, fuck.
with a hammer, he could just fart on them.
Yeah. True.
Or goat man.
And now we've really reached a weird place.
We've fully rotated.
Oh, am I pregnant now? I need a plan B. I need a plan B for sure.
I don't know. I feel bad for these people.
I do
sucks.
too. Like, I feel horrible because from everything everyone says, she was a good person, doing the best for her and her kids. And she was just trying to help this woman who reached out to her because her husband was very abusive to her. And this is what she got for it.
Although I kind of want to know what the cabin looked like. Was it like a super nice? I know there's probably pictures.
It was like a 3-story with the top being like a really small dormer one. It was yellow. It looked like one of our Blue Ridge cabins.
Because all I'm picturing is like the 1-2 room cabins, and then like they're in the other room and they can't hear anything.
It was a decent looking cabin.
It was a resort, remember? So it's got to be semi decent.
It was 2 stories with like that third little
Attic
thing
type of
is
deal,
it?
yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about the resort we stay at up in the mountains, and all I'm thinking is like, if I could, I would hear something.
not that resort. Yeah.
No, yeah, but like kind of thinking like that's so small. Like if somebody was being murdered, I think I would hear it.
And those sounds echo.
Yeah.
When Becky and I were at the resort, I heard something probably 3 miles away, but she woke up and my eyes were this big. She's like, "What are you looking at?" I'm like, "I see red eyes."
I had to go check out the outside and look around and make sure that we weren't being attacked by a Sasquatch.
Fair.
Becky like gets up and looks out windows and open door. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" White girl die. Like,
well, I didn't want to get murdered. Like I didn't want to.
She just rips open the blinds. And
I did not rip open the blind. I peeked out. If there was somebody about to come busting in, we need to start preparing for it.
No, we need to ignore it and go back to sleep. Honestly, it's probably what these kids
I
did.
am not
Scary
about
noise.
that life. I want to make sure we got to protect and we got to attack. That's the rules.
Yeah.
Just throw boo at it. Boo,
Yeah.
just feed it.
Chucky would claw it.
Yeah.
To death.
I don't know. I just hate it. Did they, okay, and this is my ignorance, but was Tina's body so decayed that they could not?
Oh, she was just bones.
Yeah, just bones. Like she found like their skull and some other bones. Like not all of it.
Like
Whatever.
a jawbone.
Yeah.
And
That's so sad.
they found a pair of Levi's blue jeans, empty roll of surgical tape dispenser, and something else out there with her.
They should have kept those Levi's. 80s ones are expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were nice jeans.
That's sad.
Think about a surgical tape dispenser.
Mhm.
That's got to be something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So the FBI was brought in to investigate Tina's disappearance.
Okay, yeah.
And when they found no leads and did nothing, they said they felt like the local police department was doing a good job. The police department that they had just decided were inept and ineffectual. So I feel like the sheriff was like, yeah, we're doing all we can, like really bullshitted and gaslighted them.
Fucking thin blue line.
Mm-hmm.
well, and I think that the problem here also is that this wasn't a family that was. I don't think they actually had a big family. If it was my family, or if it was even Angie, I'd be like, you need to find more people. I want to investigate. Like, how do you not have any information as to who did it? Like, you
Yeah.
have hammers, you have knives, you have all of this stuff.
Well, and not only that, but remember their alibi? So they had gone to the bar with Maryland, Bo, and Marty went to the bar.
Yeah.
He didn't like the music playing. He got really violent. He yells at the bar manager, and they go home, drop Marilyn off, apparently call the bar, yell at the guy about the music some more, and then he and Bo say they left Marilyn at home and went back to the bar. Well, how easy would that have been to check? Like, this bar manager would have been looking out for them.
Yeah.
It was a small bar in a resort town. Like, that alibi would have been so easy to check. And not only that, but Marilyn recently did an interview where she said, oh, he did this. She said, they did this. What more do you need? You got the bloody knife.
Mm-hmm.
He told her, apparently he's written this letter, but he basically admitted to her that he did it. He admitted to the cops when he said, I guess he could have seen something, but I didn't detect him. So you were there.
Yep.
And maybe they met up with somebody or Bo knew somebody who was into this shady shit, and they brought somebody with them to do it. Either way, they know what happened.
They know
Yeah.
something.
Plus, somebody else knew who called and said, hey, yeah, that's Tina Sharpe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just find it, I find it strange. What I find sad is it's not even the victims in this case. It's also the kids who were left there.
That survivor's close got to be rough.
Well,
as
and
fuck.
the thing is, you got to think about it from their perspective. Is like, if they had heard it, could they have stopped it? Now, I know Greg, Sue's other son, had said that he had peeked out at one point because he thought he had heard some weird noises. And he thought he had seen somebody in there who was arguing with Sue, but nothing to the extent of her being bound and gagged.
Maybe the screams the neighbors heard with them arguing.
And that's fairly possible. Like, maybe it didn't just occur like in an instant. It was over a period of time where they were arguing back and forth. They hear them arguing, go back to bed. Although if I'm, and you don't know how kids are, but if I was them, I'd probably be like, this is a little strange.
She left her husband because they had a really abusive, violent relationship.
Yeah.
She literally went from Connecticut to California. So they're probably used to hearing screaming and violence.
Yeah.
You can get used to anything and sleep through anything when you're used to it. So,
Yeah.
like, thinking about what you just said, I think that even if they're so used to yelling at that point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they thought that maybe her ex-husband came and killed him, because he was so violent.
Yeah. You got to also kind of wonder, like, if you were going to, let's say hypothetically, if you didn't believe Marty and Bo did it, why was the ex-husband not as thoroughly examined? If you're going to throw off a scent, the number one person you're going to be throwing it to is going to be the ex-husband in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Like, unless he had a rock solid alibi that they couldn't explain.
Yeah.
But the thing is here is it's like, if you are trying to work so hard to ensure that your friend doesn't get caught, like, I would be throwing as much shade onto the ex-husband as I possibly could.
Yep, I agree.
There was a couple of other things that got ignored in the evidence portion of it. Apparently, there was the tape of the anonymous tip regarding Tina was found sealed in case files. And it had been untouched by the county sheriff's office, who you had been talking about. Also located a hammer to be one of the murder weapons in a dried up pond in Keddie.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like they just had like these three or four. There was a lot of weapons involved in this point.
Another thing was Sue had been hit in the head with a BB gun, an
Yep.
880 BB gun. So all of these things you could like start narrowing down. Process of elimination. With it being a resort town and really small, it's so doubtful that people are coming in, doing this, and leaving.
Yeah. It's someone from there.
Yeah.
Well, that isn't. Oh, sorry. I just found a picture of the cabin. I was like, dang, that's creepy looking.
Let me see.
Hold on. That's what it looks like.
Ooh, that's fucking...
Yeah.
Cabin in the woods, guys. So here's what I've learned today from this podcast episode. Don't go sit in the cabin in the woods. Don't try and help people out of abusive relationships. And, buy an ADT system so people can't bust into your house. Although they didn't have forced entry, so I guess that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Don't buy a ring system either because you get spied on.
Hey, I think a ring system, in this day and age, I actually think having those systems make it so much easier from my perspective because, hey, I see you coming into your house.
And not only that, but some of those ring systems are smart and will automatically dial. Like
Really?
Your alarm company. If
Yeah.
you connect them together and it senses something off, it'll auto dial.
It's going to send something off when I walk up. Like, this hat hair can't be
Yeah.
fucking real. It has to be a wig.
Well, you're always going to be identified, Bobby, because they'll just see your pompadour and be like,
and not
huh.
only is it video, but now it's sound.
Oh.
So when people are out there, and there's been some crazy stuff caught on these Ring doorbells, like the doorbell licker guy who goes and just like.
He has corona.
Well, for
He
sure.
might have drank some
But
Corona.
he essentially commits cunnilingus on these doorbells.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. Or the clowns that just stood on
Yeah,
people's door.
fuck that shit,
And the
dude.
guy who had the TV on his head and he just left old school TVs on everybody's porches. Like, what are you doing? My sister had her Ring doorbell go off once when she was over here. And it was these two people and they're just standing there and they lean forward and look. And then you could hear the woman going, do you think she's home? But they didn't knock or ring the doorbell.
Fuck that shit.
So, and you can speak through your ring, and Christy was like, yes, I'm home, and I'm fully armed. She wasn't home.
Yeah.
She wasn't
That
home.
is, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to do this series because I think you're doing the killing fields, Angie, and I'm going to do the Rainbow Girl murders. Mine's in the 80s as well. Yours is like a stretch of time, right?
Till current.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see like how unsolved murders kind of like are dated at this point because it's so difficult to not solve a murder anymore.
Yeah.
Like you're going to, I mean, hello, we had a cold case like we solved because, DNA testing didn't exist back then. Hey, it's there now. And if you're in the system, we gon' find you. We gon' find you. So, well, great ineptitude.
Hide your crimes.
Hide your kids, hide your crimes, and hide your husband. Well,
We're killing everybody out here.
don't hide your husbands because you're going to murder people.
Hey, Becky.
Becky.
Where can they find our cabin?
Not in Keddie.
Not here. That's right. Find it in the woods, though. You can find us on Facebook at The Free Rotation Podcast. You can also find us on Twitter at The Free Rotation. Oh, my God.
Not SoundCloud.
You can find us on Twitter
You're
at The
gonna
Free
listen to
Rotation.
us. You're gonna
We
listen
also
to us.
stream on Twitch. You can find us at The Free Rotation. Check out all of our podcasts on YouTube. And we also are affiliates of Weeby Geeks. Check out all the great podcasts at WeebyGeeksPC.com.
Or
and
Instagram.
Yeah, did you do Instagram?
I haven't done Instagram in a little bit.
No, I mean.
Oh, no, I didn't say anything about Instagram. No. We're on Instagram at The Free Rotation Podcast.
It's so hard
And
to find good
you can
help
check
these
out our
days.
What?
Nothing.
What'd you say?
Nothing.
Website.
Bobby said it.
TheFreeRotation.com. If you go to the Free Rotation Podcast, you won't find anything. It's TheFreeRotation.com. All right. Well, yay for ineptitude cop
No.
searching.
Well, you know this saying. It's all about who you know.
It's like really what this episode was
In
about.
every single way, it's who you know.